The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the International Society of Chief Data Officers regular webinar, How CDOs Succeed. I am not Michael Cervais because Michael is stuck on a conference call somewhere else. So I'll do the intro here, and then we're certainly looking forward to introducing our guest, Doug Laney, in just a minute here. Again, the International Society is created out of the MIT CDO IQ Symposium, which is the largest worldwide gathering of data leadership that we have. The membership in this organization is a non-for-profit organization. We're trying to provide support for data leaders through this webinar and other related types of activities. We have a set of products that we've pulled out. Again, you may want to visit our website, iscdo.org, take a look at some things like the CDO job description, first 100 days as a CDO, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, we are also committed to bringing you all the best in the latest from our group of thought leaders that we've had working in this area for a long. And if you have not ever heard of Doug Laney's name, welcome and introduce yourself to Doug, because he has been an outstanding voice in this area for many, many years. It's hard to become a best-selling author, but when you do write a book such as influential as Infonomics, it's pretty easy at this point. And so the real question for Doug was, what are you going to do next? What does your sophomore album look like on this, if we were putting it in music here? But Doug has been a very storied career around this. He spent many years with Gartner and was literally associated with data leadership out there. He's left Gartner a couple of years ago, and he's working with a group called West Monroe Partners on this, and has many other things, as you can see here from his biography on here. He's on Twitter at Doug Laney, and at LinkedIn at Infonomics. And Doug, welcome to the program here. We're so pleased that you're able to take some time and join us today.
Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate the time to be with you. So you showed the Data Juice book there, and as a kind of a gift to everyone who's on today, if anyone wants to reach out to me and get a copy of signed copy of Data Juice or copies for your management or executive team, reach out to me on LinkedIn or email. So yeah, happy to share that with you. So yeah, the follow-on to Infonomics was Data Juice, and in Infonomics there were a number of stories on how organizations were using data and analytics in innovative and high-value ways, and people kind of wanted more stories. And so while I was at Gartner, I started compiling.
Hey Doug, sorry,
yeah.
We just transferred control to you, but you're not presenting at the moment. I'm not sure if you
yeah,
are.
I will in a second here.
That's okay. There we go. We're seeing your screen now.
Application. Let's show the right one here again. There we go. Okay, we got it.
Yep. We got it.
Yeah. So folks were asking for more stories, and so while I was at Gartner, I started compiling real-world use cases of how organizations are using data and analytics in high-value and innovative ways. And like a dozen stories turned into 50 stories, turned into 500, 700 stories now I think I've got. So there's kind of some pressure to put that into a book, but like I say, my wife told me if I ever wrote another book, it would have to be titled "How I Use Big Data to Find My Next Wife." so I said, "Well, how about if I crowdsource it?" She says, "Well, what does that mean?" I said, "Well, I get I write about other people's stories, and I get some researchers to help out, and then I get people like Peter." And Robert, did you write? You wrote an analysis too?
I did indeed. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
You did. So both of you, did an analysis. So then each of the stories, I kind of conscripted or invited friends like Peter and Robert and others to analyze the story and say, listen, what did we learn from the story? What was interesting? What jumped out at you? What should this organization perhaps do next, to follow on to their success? And so I think the stories themselves in the book, there's 101 stories, are really inspirational, but I think the analyses that experts, CDOs, and other experts around the world have provided are really quite instructive. So really pleased with the way it turned out, and yeah, like I said, happy to make copies available to you. So just reach out to me. So what I'm going to do today is just going to walk you through our overall approach to data monetization. So as companies become inspired by these use cases, they're like, well, all right, how do I do this? How do I start generating new value streams from data? We're already doing a lot of reporting and and analytics, but how do we actually monetize our data? How do we prove the economic value of data and use data in new ways? So that's what I'm going to share with you today. Just a little background for those who aren't familiar with West Monroe. I did join West Monroe a couple of years ago, a little longer than that, from after a long career at Gartner. While I was at Gartner, I got to know a lot of consulting firms and get exposed to them, and met these folks from West Monroe, and really just was impressed by the culture, values, talent, skills, everything. And they took a real interest into the infonomics idea. I really wanted to put that to work on helping organizations monetize and manage and measure data as an actual corporate asset. West Monroe is, if you're familiar, is kind of born from the ashes of Arthur Andersen after the Enron scandal. So Arthur Andersen had this business consulting group, and when Arthur Andersen kind of blew up, about 4 people from Arthur Andersen's business consulting decided to form a new consultancy with kind of, again, new values and culture. So about 2,500 people based in Chicago, offices throughout North America, and now in London as well. So one of the other interesting things that we do is we do technology diligence work for private equity firms. So we do about 1,000 deals a year. We advise on about 1,000 deals a year, looking at the tech stack of the target companies for M&A or other kinds of acquisitions. And now with this economic concept, we now can do data diligence. So we're analyzing the value of the data, the possibilities of the data, as part of the kind of the merged entity. So that's something else we do. A lot of the work we do is very multidisciplinary. We'll bring in technology expertise along with industry experts, and so anyway, enough about us. So there's about infonomics, and so I'm going to give an overview of data monetization. So the first question is, what is data monetization? It's one of those terms that is kind of tossed around a bit today. There are a lot of misconceptions around it being strictly around selling data, but I think most of you are kind of beyond that. So here's a pithy definition that we use, and a little bit to unpack here, and that is that data monetization is the process of generating measurable value streams from available data assets. So unpacking this a bit, so it's a process. One, but it shouldn't be like a science experiment or a one-time thing. The organizations that we're working with are ones who really want to create a business unit or a business function that is commercializing or generating new value streams from their data. The second part of this is measurable. So this kind of gets back to some of the infonomics principles that even if you're doing great stuff with data, if you're not measuring it, then it's difficult to claim that that you're monetizing it. So one of the kind of key components of what we're doing a lot of is helping organizations understand the value of their data, the value at rest, the value once it's activated, the potential value based on future probable use cases, so and the value of data products. So we have some models, and I'll share a little bit of that with you in a bit. And then value streams. So again, we're not just looking at selling data, we're looking at generating value in a variety of ways, and I'll show you what some of those patterns are. And then the last part is available data assets, which really subtly speaks to the fact that a lot of the data that organizations are generating value from is not their own data, but it's data that they've harvested or gathered externally, and whether that's from social media or from partners or suppliers or harvested web content or whatever, or open data. There's a lot of ways to generate value from not just your own data assets, but external ones as well. So hopefully this short definition kind of encapsulates everything that we really believe is important around data monetization. And people call it different things. You call it data commercialization or use case development or information innovation, whatever you want to call it, it's fine. So here's our overall approach, and I wrote a bit about this in Infonomics, and it's been a bit enhanced since then. The first part is we've got kind of 3 phases here. One is really ideation. The second phase is more about design, and third phase is about engineering. So in the first phase here, we're generating and refining ideas for innovating with data or generating new value streams. Then we want to kind of assess and prioritize those ideas. We have a range of feasibility characteristics that we look at, and I'll share those with you in a moment. And then the second phase is developing and testing the markets, identifying buyers. How are we going to package and license it, just like as we would with any other product. And that's something you'll probably notice here pretty quick, is that this really follows the same approach that any organization uses for new product introduction, new product development. So I'm the first to admit there's not a lot new here. It's about just following traditional methods for new product development. And then we want to identify the data assets or the the raw materials that we're using to create these data products, specifying the technical requirements, and then if we're really going to treat this as a data product, then we need to think about how we're going to support it and maintain it and so forth. And then the third phase is really just about architecting and engineering the data products, dealing with any infrastructure issues that need to be dealt with. Maybe you need a data warehouse or a data lake or a data mart or a data mesh or something to support that data product. Then we want to develop the data product itself, which often involves data integration of some kind or some kind of algorithm or analytics behind it. And then of course you want to introduce how you're going to market and support these products and sell them, and then manage the program. And when I talk about supporting and selling them, that may be internal as well. So as you well know, developing a new analytic idea or solution sometimes is as difficult to sell it and implement it internally as externally. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend most of the time talking about the first couple of points here. And Peter, Robert, I don't know if people want to submit questions or want to jump in. I don't know how many people are on the call. It looks like just short of 30 or so. But I'm happy to take questions along the way, or if you want to interject, feel free. We can make this conversational. Okay.
Sure.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, let me just let the folks know that you can use the questions option on the panel there to submit your questions, and then what we'll do is we'll pepper them throughout the conversation with Doug as well. So thanks, Doug.
Yeah, and I'm going to move pretty quickly because I assume given who you all are, these concepts are not too unfamiliar, but I want to just kind of lay out the entire approach for you. So the first phase here, ideation and refining the ideas and determining the feasibility. So one of the things we like to do is make sure that we express to the folks who are involved in the workshops that there's a lot of talk about data being the new oil, and while that certainly reflects a sentiment that true sentiment that data is a driver of the economy today, much the way that oil was or still is starting a century or more ago. Data has these unique qualities that make it potentially that much more valuable than oil. When you consume a drop of oil, you can only consume it one way at a time. You can't consume it over and over again, I guess, other than if you use it as a lubricant, and that it's not regenerative or progenitive. It doesn't create more oil. But data is really different. It's what economists would call a non-rivalrous, non-depleting, or progenitive or regenerative asset. That it can be used over and over again. It can be used multiple ways simultaneously. And when we do use data, we're typically in a position to collect more data about wherever and whenever that was used. So what we find is the companies that are really thriving today in the economy are taking full advantage of those characteristics. Even if you're not in the data business, you can still take advantage of those characteristics, and that's really, I think, what's helping organizations become more digital or really thrive in the data economy today. We even find that companies that are more data savvy or data product companies have market to book value ratios that are much higher than the market average. And by data savvy, we find that companies that have a chief data officer, a data science organization, data governance function, somehow are recognized by investors and favored by them. But there's still a lot of myths, as I mentioned, around data monetization, and that is that it has to be sold, requires the exchange of cash, you're only using your own data, and so forth. And so one of the things we try to do in these workshops is talk about this. And I actually just taught a class on this at TDWI in Orlando last week. And so we discussed a whole bunch of other kinds of myths that people have heard around data monetization. One of the more interesting ones there is at the bottom is that due to privacy regulations, you can't monetize your customer data. And I'm going to show you why that's actually a myth and not entirely true, or actually not at all untrue. Not at all true, sorry. So the first thing we want to do is have these workshops for ideation. And the kinds of people that we love to have in these workshops are people who understand the business, who understand the data, who understand the subject matter. And ideally, if we're thinking about monetizing data externally, we want to include folks who are maybe a key customer, supplier, or partner, or at least somebody who can represent them. I find this is often an afterthought by a lot of our clients, and really something I'm going to start pushing harder on, because I think we've had trouble in some of the workshops because there was nobody there to represent the external entities who might find your data or insights valuable. And so then the activities we'll want to start with kind of gather some background, data models, sample data, maybe some identification of key partners and suppliers, and really just kind of understand the business a bit. And then in the workshops, I'll do a primer exercise to kind of get everybody out of their headspace. We'll usually use like a football or baseball kind of example, and do a little monetization, fun little gamified activity. And then I'll go through the rest of these, but we're going to look at business drivers, what kind of data is available, what are others doing with data, to try to tease those apart and think about how we might apply some of those ideas. And then we have some exercises to focus on hypothesizing ways to use data. So I talked about the patterns of data monetization, and in infonomics, I've highlighted a few of most of these, but there's some new ones that have actually come up. And so when I've looked through the ways that organizations are generating value from data, they're typically falling into kind of two main broad categories, and that is indirect and direct data monetization. So indirect data monetization is more about using data internally to generate value, not necessarily generate revenue directly, but improve processes or reduce risk or identify new markets or improve partnerships. And then there's a couple of new ones there at the bottom. Some really novel things that we're doing, which is, I didn't mention, but data, even though people talk about it as an asset, the accounting profession still doesn't recognize data as an asset. And that creates not only some, an undue market volatility and a lack of transparency, but perhaps a lack of incentive or imperative within an organization to generate value from data. It also kind of hides the value of your business from investors, because you're not reporting on the value of your data. And as I showed, data companies and data product companies get valued much higher at a much higher multiple than other companies. And so it would really be probably good to put it on the balance sheet if you could. And so one way to do this is by assetizing data. And so what we're working on with some clients is moving their data and digital assets into a separate holding company, valuing that business, and then including the value of that business on the parent company's balance sheet. So it's a bit of accounting shenanigans, but it's entirely kosher. That's a mixed metaphor there. But it enables you to not only represent the value of your data on your balance sheet, but then provide some focus, because now you have a separate company that is specifically tasked with generating value from data and digital assets. So we're doing this with a sports franchise and a manufacturing company and some others, but it's a kind of an interesting new thing. And then at the bottom there, under indirect data monetization, is publishing branded indices. And so this is really not a form of direct data monetization, but it goes hand in hand. So if you're making data available to a marketplace or to externally, one way to advertise that is by creating a branded index. So a great example of that is like the ADP's job index. So ADP as collects a lot of data on employment and workforce and payrolls and so forth. And so they published this branded index, which is known to be more timely and more accurate than even the US government's own numbers. So they don't publish it just to poke a finger in the eye of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They publish it to advertise that they've got data products available for sale. And ADP makes millions of dollars selling or licensing data and insights on labor. And then there, at the bottom, there's direct data monetization. So we can obviously sell data directly or license it directly, but we can also enhance existing products or services or barter or trade with it. And the reason I put the bartering and trading first is because there are perhaps some particular advantages with making data available for non-cash considerations like favorable commercial terms or other goods and services. And the reason is because data is not a balance sheet asset. Ostensibly, these kinds of transactions where you're exchanging data in return for some kind of commercial favor is not reportable from an accounting standpoint. Now, I'm not here to give tax advice, but I do know that companies that do exchange data in this way very often don't. It's not something that they feel is taxable. Now, some do. There are some grocers, for example, that will give discounts in return for using your loyalty card, and they do actually collect tax on the free food that they're giving you. So some do, some don't. But it's I think in a B2B world, you're pretty. I think you're pretty safe in that kind of transaction. Anyway, we can also sell insights and analysis and reports. We don't have to sell raw data. And then there's a couple at the bottom here that are new and interesting. Remember I mentioned that you can monetize customer data even in light of industry regulations and privacy regulations like GDPR and the CCPA and HIPAA and so forth. And so this is what we call inverted data monetization. And the idea is that, I can't sell you my customer data, but I can sell your stuff to my customers. So it's kind of flip the model upside down. And think about like Facebook. So this is what Facebook does. They don't sell their data anymore, ostensibly, but they do sell access to customers to businesses based on those customer profiles. And so they'll introduce products and services to us online based on our likes and interests and whatnot. And so we're doing this kind of thing with companies like a hospital right now who knows who its diabetes patients are, but it can't sell that data to anyone. But it can introduce to those patients healthy meal plans, gym memberships, glucose monitoring, at-home test kits, and do that either as a data for good kind of solution or take a referral fee or commission from those companies. We're also setting up marketplaces for companies that there's one in particular who sells a particular product to affluent individuals, and so they're creating a marketplace to sell other products or introduce others' products to their own customers. Again, without ever exposing who those customers are, but exposing those customers to other ancillary products and services. And then at the bottom there's collateralizing data. And so the classic example of this is the airlines. At the beginning of the pandemic, had to take out loans to stay aloft, pun intended, and they looked around and like, what do we have to collateralize for these loans? And they're like, well, how about our aircraft? Well, no, we lease those. How about our gates? No, we lease those too. So what do they own? They own their customer data. They own their customer loyalty programs. So United and American Airlines, for example, collateralize their customer loyalty programs to the tune of $20 and $30 billion. $20 billion for American and $30 billion for United. And they so not only was that just like a freaking huge number, but catch this: the value of the businesses at the time were only $8 and $9 billion. So consider that the value of your company's data may actually be more valuable than the company itself. I'm sure this isn't the case for a lot of companies, but it is an eye-opener to businesses that they're sitting on a gold mine of latent value, and that can be monetized in a variety of ways. All right, so now kind of with that understanding of the breadth of ways that data can be monetized, we kind of get into the workshop, and we want to better understand the key business drivers for the organization to kind of stay focused. So what's a primary interest from a mission perspective? Is it revenue, growth, costs, risk, quality? Those are kind of the primary dimensions. But those are often difficult to target directly. But indirectly, we can target them by focusing on improving retention or customer experience or the stability of our products or the efficiency of the way we're running our business. And so those are often the kind of the secondary drivers that we're going to target more directly with data monetization efforts. This dial you'll also find throughout the data juice book. Each of the stories in the book is tagged with the key drivers from that story. So you can see, like, this is from a story where differentiation and customer experience and quality were the main drivers of that story. So there's actually an index in the book too. So if you're interested in stories related to, say, differentiation or quality, you can flip right to those stories. As I mentioned, we also want to consider external data sources. So in these workshops, we want to look not only at what enterprise data you have, but what maybe dark data you have, data that you've forgotten about or archived, or often contracts or emails or reports or things like that. And then externally, what kind of open data, harvested web content, social media, partner data, or syndicated data could enhance the value of your own data, or maybe even stand on its own as a unique data product that you've come up with. A great example of this is a company in Chicago called Food Genius that started scraping restaurant menu data and making insights available to restaurateurs and chefs. They ended up getting acquired by U.S. Foods because U.S. Foods felt that they could use that data to better target their own sales to commercial restaurants and grocers and so forth. And then we also kind of want to think about, as we lay out all of this data, which data is the most highly monetizable. So these are kind of some kind of key points. I think data that originates with your organization, that you claim provenance or control over is probably the most valuable data, because others don't have access to it, right? Yet. And data that's proprietary, data that is accepted context, meaning it's not really so exclusive to your own organization, but others would understand it or find value in it. Obviously, data that's secure, that isn't leaked, data that's not restricted in the way you use it. So customer data is, of course, still problematic, but not entirely so. And we want, of course, to focus on monetizing data that's really accurate and complete, and data that's going to continue to be available. So if you're thinking about monetizing data from a system that is being replaced next year, maybe that's not such a good idea. But the flip side is, hey, maybe that new system that we're implementing, maybe a new CRM or ERP system, maybe there's data in that system that is highly monetizable, and in fact, we can use the future value of that data to pay for the system itself. It's an interesting concept that some companies are doing, and there's a paper that my colleague Michael Smith and I wrote back in years ago at Gartner, suggesting how to do that. If you're interested, I can send you the link. We also want to understand the stakeholder business drivers. So if we're thinking about monetizing data externally, who are all these stakeholders? Well, we pretty much understand our core business, internally and our immediate suppliers and partners and customers and so forth. But there are others throughout our extended business ecosystem who might find our data valuable. Standards bodies, or our customers' customers, or suppliers' suppliers, our suppliers' customers, our partners' suppliers, and so forth. Industry associations, investors, hedge funds, government organizations. There might even be an opportunity to license data to competing organizations in some cases. So we want to think through the range of potential stakeholders and what their kind of profiles are, and what's keeping them awake, and how we might be able to enhance their own businesses, or make them better partners of ours. And then we want to think about how we're going to start packaging data. We're not, obviously we can just sell or license raw data, but that's, not entirely consumable. But we want to think about how we build that data into something that's much more useful. A lot of companies, when they're thinking about analytics, are very often thinking about doing more descriptive analytics as hindsight-oriented stuff. You've probably seen this in various forms. I know Tom Davenport's been talking about it. We had this chart a similar chart like this at Gartner, almost 20 years ago. But the point here is that the higher value ways to package analytics are if you can do things that are more diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, or we can automate things with data. So, why put kind of the boring label on descriptive analytics? Everybody loves a benchmark, so maybe a great data product to think about might be helping organizations benchmark themselves against, having your suppliers benchmark themselves against one another. They do like that. But if you can add some kind of diagnostic or predictive component to that, it's even more valuable. And in fact, I just go back to that for a second. When I look through this range of hundreds of stories that I've collected, almost none of them have anything to do with the kind of the left side here, the descriptive analytics. Almost all the high value stories are where somebody's done something that's diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, or automated or digitized something. And so then in the workshop, depending on how we're organized, we'll run kind of sub workshops or maybe a little competing exercises where we will ask individuals to kind of represent different aspects of the business or different stakeholders and come up with questions that go beyond what is happening. What kind of questions we ask about why things are happening in production or distribution or marketing, or maybe with one of our partners or suppliers, or what's going to happen, or how we can make something happen. And once we have kind of those questions in mind, we can start to think about how to package them into actual data products. Another source of ideas is what are others doing, both within and outside our industry. As consultants, I know Peter, this is probably the case for you too, and Robert, you often get asked by clients, what are others in our industry doing? You're probably nicer than me, but my flippant response to that is, why do you want to be in second place? Why not, why not leverage ideas from other industries? And one of my favorite examples of that is the police department in Los Angeles identified that crimes kind of follow a pattern of seismic aftershocks. So after one crime, it often leads to other crimes. And so they applied some seismic prediction algorithms to crimes and were able to reduce violent crimes by about 30% where they, based on that model. So, and deploying resources more proactively. So kind of a cool example there, but pretty much any example from any industry can kind of be teased apart and applied to any other industry. So don't have your blinders on, is kind of my recommendation. I can share a number of examples. These are some of my, my favorite stories. There are, again, dozens of stories in the book. I'll share some of these. I think Peter on the last call, I might have shared some of these already, but I'll share them anyway. So Walmart, some years ago, realized, they had a great search engine online, but it was really just kind of looking at its own data. And so when people were searching for the word house, it was taking them to housing goods and housewares and dog houses. And so what people were actually looking for was the box DVD set of the television show, the medical drama House. And so Walmart realized then that it was, they really needed to be paying more attention to what was going on in the world, what was trending. And when they upgraded their search engine to do so, they ended up reducing shopping cart abandonment by 10 to 15% across the board, which is like, I don't know, $1 billion of additional value for Walmart. Infinity Insurance, like many insurance companies, have realized they're sitting on a gold mine of adjuster reports. By text mining the adjuster reports, they can identify the kinds of language that's used in fraudulent claims. They ended up reducing fraudulent claims by like 50%, improving their fraudulent claims processing by like 98%, subrogating tens of millions of dollars of previously paid out fraudulent claims. So I think something that a lot of insurance companies are doing today to combat claim fraud. Lockheed Martin heard me talk some years ago about the topic of dark data, and where I suggested that maybe a company could analyze its documentation and emails to identify projects that are kind of going sideways from a scope or budget or personnel or technology perspective. And so they implemented that on one of their product lines. I think it was the F-35, and now they are able to identify project issues 3 times faster and are saving hundreds of millions of dollars a year in cost overruns, but by analyzing project documentation and communications. Dollar General is just one example of a company that has a self-funding data warehouse or data lake by making its data available to its CPG suppliers. I think that concept of a self-funding analytic environment ought to be aspirational for any CDO, and any CDO that isn't able to achieve that is probably at risk of their job. And so there's a couple of parts to that. One is, are you measuring the value that that data is generating, and 2, are you generating enough value in enough ways from that data to pay for the environment itself? Allstate came to us a few years ago and said, listen, the automobile companies want to buy our claims data, but we're the good hands company, right? We can't be seen as selling our customer data, even if we anonymize it and deaggregate it and encrypt it and redact it. So, I said, this is not a technology or a data issue or anything like that. It's a brand issue. So why not take this idea off brand? It's a great idea because it's a win-win-win for everybody. More competitive cars for the automaker, better, safer cars for the individual, and lower loss ratios for Allstate. Everybody wins. So, but reputationally, it was an issue for them. So I suggested taking it off brand, and so that's what they did. They formed a company called Arity, A-R-I-T-Y. It's a platform for monetizing insurance data. Minute Maid gets a call from Chick-fil-A and who says, listen, the quality of your orange juice is great, but it's inconsistent region by region, season by season. We need it to be consistent all the time everywhere, or we're going to move to Sunny Delight. So, anyway, and so I'm not sure that was an empty threat, but so Minute Maid, which is owned by Coke, stick some flavorologists on an orange to identify there were like 600 flavor components, and then they gathered all sorts of data, crop yields, and cost pressures, and customer preferences. They claim a quintillion data points have gone into this precise dynamic formula for blending orange juice, and which has helped them preserve and expand their $2 billion orange juice business. So now, if there's like a hurricane or a frost or a freeze, they can replan the entire business or the entire operation in like 5 to 10 minutes, which is really cool. And then, so I'd like to remind people, next time you're drinking a glass of orange juice, you recognize that you're drinking an algorithm. Then the last one, you may have heard of, it's a fun story. It's the kind of creative story. In Iceland, they have this situation where everybody's related to everybody, very homogeneous society. And so, anyway, I guess it makes for fun family reunions, but difficult to find a mate who's not your cousin, seriously. And so some enterprising young folks built an app for that. And so it ingests the Icelandic genealogy database. And so you can now, this is their tagline, not mine, you can bump your phones before you bump in bed. But so just clever ways to use data across the board in high value or innovative ways. During these workshops, we share a variety of different stories that are related or unrelated to the industry that kind of help stir the creative juices or inspire or shame the business into wanting to do more with their data. I talked about packaging data, and so yes, we can sell raw data, but we can also do package it a lot of different ways. We can provide query access, self-service access. We can create analytic workspaces. IRI has done this with their data. It's a really cool way of not exposing data externally, but inviting customers to come to your own platform to bring their own data, bring their own analytic tools, or use your analytic tools and your own data, and let them work in your own workspace. Or you can enrich data or pre-aggregate data or create analytics or insights or reports, or maybe even go as far as to create custom data products or integrated data solutions for your partners or suppliers or customers. So, and the neat thing is you don't have to pick one of these because data is a non-rivalrous, non-depleting asset. You can package it up in multiple ways. So I often think about this very much in the same way as like, we don't go to like wheat fields and harvest wheat, ourselves. We're going to go there and pick wheat and do stuff with it. We buy flour or we buy bread or we buy sandwiches. So it's been packaged and processed in different ways. So we can think about data much the same way. And the more we process it, the market for it might get smaller, and certainly the expense of doing so is greater. So something to consider. And then once we're done, we've generated a number of ideas. We kind of list them out, maybe tag them in different ways by the type of monetization or type of benefit. We also want to know, is there a current initiative within the business that's related to this? Are we stepping on somebody's toes, or are we going to be able to leverage something that's already being done? And so you can tag these in different ways. And then we want to get into the second part, which is the feasibility assessment. And so we want to look not only at the economic feasibility, but we want to look at, this is a practical idea. Is it, something that's cool? Is it really going to be usable? Is it something we could actually market? Is it going to have broad enough appeal? Is it going to have some societal benefits and maybe ecological benefits? And then from a complexity standpoint, are we able to manage this ourselves? Is it something we can handle? Technologically, is the data good enough to do this with? Is it something that can scale? And then are we going to run into some like legal or ethical issues as well? And so we'll kind of tag those. And because yes, I'm from Gartner, I like quadrants. So we put them into a quadrant here. And so those that are higher impact and lower complexity are those that will prioritize. I got a mouse here. And then those that are maybe lower impact but lower complexity, we might want to defer. Those that are higher impact but higher complexity, we might want to think about building up some capability for those or combining them in some way. And those that are low impact and high complexity, we probably want to avoid altogether. So this helps us prioritize them a bit. Skip that. So let me talk for a second as we wrap up about value. And so I mentioned that data monetization, it's hard to claim you're monetizing data if you're not measuring the value of it. And so we have, and I mentioned this at length in the Infonomics book on how to quantify data's value. This is kind of a high level about how we're doing it for some clients. And so you look at data's value this way. What are the costs to generate, create, store the data? And then on the right side, what are the benefits that are generated from it? And from that, we kind of generate the net asset value for a data asset. So this is kind of one example of that, where we're identifying the source systems and we apportion or allocate the costs. We also allocate the benefits to data, because there are other things that go into costs and other things that go into driving benefits, not just data. There's labor, there's other assets that are involved in generating direct sales. Or customer support. And so we kind of apportion the data. So this is a high level look at how we might do this for a given data asset. And then I think it's important to make sure to get out in front of some of the roadblocks of data monetization. A lot of organizations will have other priorities. Data is not a recognized asset. You may have these ethical roadblocks, or maybe you're already giving data away for free. A lot of retailers already give away data to their suppliers, and so at what point do you kind of cut that off? Because they keep asking for more and more data, and becomes a bit of a slippery slope. So figure out where you're going to cut that off and say, listen, we're happy to provide you this level of data or benchmarking, but beyond that, listen, here's what we're prepared to do, but it's going to cost you more. Or you just don't have the foundational capabilities or data quality or culture of R&D, or maybe just lacking experience. So there's a lot of roadblocks to this to kind of get out in front of. One of the things that we do, and I don't know if I've got a slide on this later, if I hit the slide, but we help organizations with self-funded data monetization efforts. So a couple of ways we can do this is we work with a commercial bank who will fund a data monetization initiative, basically put the data into an escrow. We develop ways to monetize it and then pay a royalty back to you, the data owner. Very much like how farmers, ranchers get paid for putting oil wells in their fields, or real estate speculation is done. So the same sort of business model now with data. And like I said, we're working with some commercial banks and lenders who can help fund data monetization initiatives. And then just to wrap up, the other steps we get into are the market planning. I'm not going to get into detail here, but we can share other materials. The market planning, the data curation and preparation, the specifying the technical environments, how are we going to support and maintain the data products, and then the third phase into engineering, how are we engineering the back-end infrastructure requirements, developing the data product itself, and then implementing and testing, and then handling the product and project management across the board. Oh yeah, so here's the thing on the finance data products. So the idea is that the data product, the data is moved into a data trust over here. The commercial bank funds the initiative. We will create data products and maybe co-license them with you, and then the royalties are paid back to the data owner. So it's a simple look at how that works. Okay. And then I think just to wrap up, and then we'll take any questions or let everyone go a little early. I think the important thing is here to think about data, again, in terms of it being this non-rivalrous, non-depleting, progenitive asset that can be monetized in multiple ways. Think about monetizing data that's not just your own. Think about monetizing data, again, not just internally, but externally as well, throughout not just your immediate partners and suppliers, but also your extended business ecosystem. Follow a traditional product design and development approach. If you've got one already, use it, and apply it just as you would with any other product. These ideation workshops, as I showed you, there are different kinds of exercises that we do within them. You can run them on your own, or have us come and help facilitate them. And then for the stakeholders, make sure you understand their personas. Look at the feasibility of the ideas that you generate, do an economic analysis, of course, and then appreciate that there are new roles involved in data monetization that you might not already have, and think about how to get those. And then, as I mentioned, they're at the outset, data has these really unique economic qualities, some that I didn't get into, like marginal utility and productivity frontiers and supply and demand are very, very interesting concepts when we try to apply those to data, and there's a lot to be learned from that. That's another topic that I talk on and actually teach in the economics class, the MBA class I teach, so we can get into that stuff. So I'm going to wrap up here, about 10 minutes left, and Peter, Robert, I don't know if you all have any questions or
we do indeed.
Chat.
So Doug, first of all, thank you for a really, really dense presentation. And I learned tons each time you do this for us, and it's just full of wonderful content. I'm not sure that CEOs yet are ready to get into the idea of SPACs, but what a brilliant way of approaching the process, right? So those of you that are not familiar, SPAC is what President Trump is trying to pull with his Truth Social idea, which is packaging some intellectual property in it and then putting it out on Wall Street to get an actual monetization piece. So I'm not saying that you're imitating Trump, Doug, but definitely a fabulous idea around all of that.
I have to look into that.
Yeah. So the other thing is too, again, just so that you know, the poor quadrant model, Boston Consulting Group claims they've got that particular piece. So I'd love to put BSG and Gartner into a ring match one day and see them fight it out for the ownership of that.
We'll go with the quadrant first. Yeah, we'll battle the quadrants.
So we do have some good questions here, though. First, one question was, what are the barriers to getting started? You hit on that with some of your at the end there, but I didn't know whether you wanted to just go back either and elucidate on that a little bit better, or what? But it was very good explanation. What are the challenges there, please?
Yeah, it's kind of some of the barriers here. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies that talk about, we really want to monetize our data, but can't for whatever reason set up a function. It's not their core business, right? But I think every organization needs to realize that they are in the data business. I met with like the CIO of Hershey's, right? And he said, try to get across the idea to our board and the other executives that we're a data company that just happens to make confections, right? We're going to make money and generate value based on the data that we generate and collect and how we use it. And there's really no way around that today for any company. And so you either kind of get on board with that, or you do it more haphazardly. And I think that the companies that are going to thrive in the data economy are ones that really start treating data as an asset, not only in how they monetize it, but also in how they manage it and measure it.
And Doug, I know you've been working on some literacy concepts around this as well. We found that if we can make these executives more literate and understanding this, that you said, it's a new paradigm. You need new people, new talent. Any more specifics on that? Probably your next book or something like that they can read.
It's a big animal. A lot of people writing about data literacy now, and boy, that takes a lot of different forms. And I sort of break it down into analytic literacy. Okay, what is the art of the possible with data? And then data literacy itself, which is how do we actually handle data as an asset? How do we apply traditional asset management principles and practices to data? A fun, one of my favorite examples is the Stats New Zealand. It's basically like their Bureau of Labor Statistics for New Zealand. And they don't allow anyone to touch or use or handle or create data until they've gone through a program where they completely understand the value of data, how to handle data. It's a safe handling program that they have to go through before anybody in the organization gets to access or create or handle data in any way. So I'd love to see that in more organizations. I think our friend John Ladley ran a program like that for a utility company in the Southeast some years ago. Same sort of thing. People didn't get the keys to the self-service analytics tool until they went through that program. And so, but I also think, like you say, Peter, that this is valuable for executives as well, and boards to fully understand that data is a real asset, even though it's not a recognized asset by the accounting profession yet.
And
are we going to start calling them the accounting mafia yet?
Yeah.
Doug, we got a couple of more questions we want to see if we get in before the top of the hour here. Maria has asked one. What is the difference between data as a product, operating model, and traditional data center of excellence with data services?
Data as a product and data services.
Traditional data center of excellence with data services. What's the difference between data as a product operating model? So there's an operating model as data as a product, and the traditional data center of excellence with data services. What's the difference? Or
there's kind of a subtle difference, and it's more. I think it's more attitudinal. That data is generating value directly as a product. With data center of excellence, you're kind of focused on helping individuals throughout the organization do things with data, but not really focused on the value generation side of it. So I think it's kind of subtle, and but I think I kind of have to understand that question a little bit better.
Sure. We had another question from Wade. Wade actually asked two questions. The first one, a little bit longer. He says, first of all, great content, Doug. He says, I think this kind of initiative requires or implies a state of maturity most clients that he has experience with are not at yet. Even developing or getting started with data governance to benchmark the valued metrics and infonomics is a substantial effort and time and investment. How do you approach this was the question Wade wanted to ask.
I think the use cases pull these through a lot. If you've got a process, an ongoing process, a periodic process for generating new and innovative use cases from data, and understand the value proposition and can compute the potential value stream from that use case, it's a lot easier to justify or invest in things like data governance and data management. But trying to invest on it in alone without understanding the outcomes from data, it's proven difficult over the last several decades.
Yeah, and I think that Wayne's other comment, which probably is what Maria is trying to get at too, is that there's a maturity here, and monetization is a substantial evolution in maturity for most organizations. So there may be baby steps that they have to get into maturity, and traditional data centers or data center of excellence could be one level of maturity. But in order to be able to leverage the monetization, you have to even get more mature in your practices.
In it may be bigger than a baby step, but one of the things that we're doing with a number of companies is helping them understand the value of their data as if it were a balance sheet asset. And that really kind of raises the understanding or level of importance of data for the organization. Like we worked with a medical products company to generate net asset value numbers for the data and compare those to the other assets in the company. And the total value of their data was worth 1/3 of the value of the business itself. Highways England did this as well. There's a great story that I published in Forbes, interviewing the CDO, Davin Crowley-Sweet at Highways England, on how he used the value of data to radically change the culture of the organization. Great story there. Check that one out.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all it, and we're pretty much wrapping up on time, Doug. Thank you indeed for yet again another wonderful topic. So,
and again, free copies of the Data Juice book if anyone wants to reach out to me. So,
what a phenomenal offer! Thank you so much, Doug. And he's serious about that. So those of you that are listening in, Doug's a great guy to ping from time to time with questions and things like that. Yes, thank you for taking the time today, Doug. This was super.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone. Have a
great
rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye.
Robert, cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.